If for those of you who have no idea who I am Jupiter. My name in real life is Troy Jessup. I work for the Utah Education and Telehealth Network and have been there for over 20 years doing all sorts of different things, but for about the last 12 to 14 years of that, it's been cybersecurity focused. And we were doing cybersecurity before it was cool up there. And so this presentation today is just, as you can imagine, as we do a lot of SAINTCON planning, I get involved in a lot of different things. And so one of the things that comes last on the list is getting my presentations prepared. So we make sure everything else is running smooth, and then we get to presentations and other things. So here's a disclaimer for this presentation. If none of this works out for you, you're welcome to find a better and more interesting talk than this. Despite any preconceptions, I am a social introvert. I've outed myself like that before, but for those of you that might be new, that's me. I'm a geek. I like dark, quiet places with techno music playing in the background and just typing on a keyboard like probably most of you do. I'm also riddled with this condition called ADD. I mean, it's not super bad, but it's terrible at the same time. And so what I do is my focus goes with the wind and things. And so we're going to be on topic a little and then off topic a whole lot, I'm sure, during this presentation. One other thing, again, despite any preconceptions, I'm way outside my element, and I've never in my life enjoyed presenting. I do it because, and this is probably something that'll warm your precious heart. I do it because I understand how important the topic of cybersecurity is. And maybe this will be the first diversion. This is ADD coming right live for you. But the first diversion is that for those, how many of you have been to the Utah SAINTCON Security Summit things since the very beginning? Anybody that's been here for a long time? Okay, we got Jared over here. There's so much light I can't see everybody, but there's some hands here. So this is, for better or for worse, the 20th security conference that we've done. Now it's been called different things. So story time maybe for a minute. We'll diverge. I'll use the time. We'll burn it. So story time is about 20 years ago. We started something called a security summit. And the reason why we did that is in my job at the Utah Education and Telehealth Network, I saw that certain entities around the state that we were sort of responsible for providing connectivity and other things to were doing not so great jobs with cybersecurity. Now, again, 20 years ago, a lot has changed in 20 years. But we're back, when we talked 20 years ago, we're talking back in the days where a firewall was still kind of an optional thing to have on your network for most people. I mean, if you think about it, that's not that long ago, but that's how far we've come in 20 years. And so one of these things is I go and I get the pants scared off of me at some conference. And I don't even remember what it was. It wasn't like Defcon or anything. It was some other thing that we went to, and we talked about cybersecurity, and I was mostly doing IT stuff at the time at UETN. And I came back and I'm like, oh man, we're in bad shape in the state of Utah. And so I threw this conference together, and we called it the Security Summit. And it was kind of an internal to our customers or our connected entities with the Utah Education Network. And we invited them to come up, and there was probably about 25 of us in the room. And for those of you that were there during that one, we did it at the Eccles Broadcast Center in the Dumb Key conference room. And we just kind of shoved the chairs in there and took over the projector. And we talked about security for just a couple of days. And it was the first point where I'm doing 20 hours of presentations and talking about all of the things that I had learned about cybersecurity at some of these recent conferences and other things. Now, I've been doing hackery things for my entire life. If you want to hear about that, I did a sort of closing keynote. I think it was last year or the year before. It's on YouTube. You can hear all about my growing up and all the nefarious and miscreant things that I used to do. So I was interested in this cybersecurity stuff, and I was there to help evangelize it for these organizations and institutions around the state. So that's where it started. So it's 20 years ago. It was called the Security Summit. But then what we found, and we're not even past the disclaimer slide, sorry. We'll get through a few more here in a minute. But then what we found was that there was this community around wanting to learn and do something better about this stuff. And so it didn't take us very long. Back in 2000 and I want to say 4 or 5, we created the Utah Saint organization. And it wasn't like anything official back then. We just thought that Utah Saint sounded cool because SAINT was an acronym for Security Advisory and Incident Network Team. And we were the Utah version of it. Not that it was anywhere else, but Utah, And so we called ourselves the Utah Saint organization. It was really just an email list and a couple places where we could be on IRC and chat with each other and tell war stories and get each other's help and things. And then we started calling these get-togethers that we did annually the Utah Saint Conference. And we did many of those for many years. So many of the people in the room would remember when we did it in Richfield. We've done it in Heber City. We've done it in Northern Utah. We've done it in St. George. In fact, we did it in St. George. We loved St. George during October. It's nice and warm still, beautiful weather and such down there. But we only ever allowed about 150 people at that conference. And it was still kind of a close-knit group. It was just our community, and we'd get together and we'd have all sorts of fun all week long. And we called it Utah Saint Conference. And it wasn't until about 2015 that we decided that we kind of were holding back from allowing other people to join our community and be involved. And so we rebranded it the SAINTCON Conference as kind of an homage to our Saint acronym roots. That's what it stands for. I kind of, in jest, always say, we're not a conference about being a bunch of conceited Mormons. We're a security group. And so SAINT is that acronym, the Security Advisory and Incident Network Team. And so we called it SAINTCON ever since. So that's your brief history. Can we get past the disclaimer? Good question, though. That was a good ADD thing, too. And as you can see, the next part of our slide here, there will be random stories like that and discussions. I have truly not prepared much for this presentation. Now, when I wrote this slide, there wasn't anything prepared, but I've since put a few things in, ADD being what it is. So set your expectations low, and we're going to do just fine. So the first thing I want to talk about today is toilet paper. So it's one of those things in life that you need. And for those of you that know who Kelly Genessy is, okay, he is affectionately known as Chunk. For those of you that don't, there's plenty of YouTube videos about Kelly in the StCon archive. But he made a quote once that says, "Toilet paper, we ought to use it." And he's not wrong, right? It's one of those things that we should use. Well, so this is going to be kind of a really just unprofessional, dumb presentation where we're going to apply toilet paper and duty and other things to our security world. As long as everybody's okay with that, that's great. If you're not, you can find another presentation. I won't be offended. So the things that we should just use and have available to us that I wanted to talk about, this is something that I've evangelized for many years, and so this might be a little bit repetitive to some. But do you use a security framework within your organization or your area of influence? And are you familiar with what a security framework is? I don't have a slide for any more than that, but just to say that if you don't have something that you can use to measure your progress in security against over time, you're probably not going to make a lot of progress, or you're going to expend effort in areas that's not super effective for what you're trying to accomplish. And so there's tons of different frameworks out there. Some of them will be familiar if I were to say like the SANS Critical Security Controls Framework. That one might be, or it's called the CIS, the Center for Internet Security Critical Controls Framework. Or how about the SP800 or the ISO 27001? These are all frameworks that can be used to gauge and have you do some self-assessment and other things to figure out where you are and where you should be focusing, because most of them prioritize how you should be doing things. And so it's like toilet paper. We ought to use it. They're out there. They're free to use. They're easy to find. They're a pain in the butt, figuratively, to implement. some of the time. One of the other things that I thought I would refer in my toilet paper part of the presentation here is vulnerabilities. How do you manage your vulnerabilities? Anybody got the golden bullet or the silver bullet for how you do that? Anyone? One device at a time. Okay, that's a great response, because sometimes you just have to do it like that. But who thinks that they don't do a great job at vulnerability management? Okay, that's fair. How many of you think that you do a good job of vulnerability management? Okay, not a single hand goes up, which isn't surprising. What is the worst thing you have to do generally as a security administrator or security analyst? Seems like you're always playing whack-a-mole with vulnerability management, right? How many of you still have, if we were to go and just do a vulnerability scan on your network, have critical level 5 vulnerabilities? Now, before you raise your hand, I do want to see hands, but if you're okay with disclosing that information, raise your hand. Okay, one or two of you out there, right? And the rest of you, we know that you should have raised your hand most likely, that you've got level 5 vulnerabilities out there. Again, we're using like a Nessus scale or a Qualis scale and things. The thing is it's hard. And so one of the things that we need to make sure that we're doing as security professionals is using the toilet paper of vulnerability management. Okay? I don't have any specific suggestions on how you do that, but I wanted to make sure that that's one of the things that I talked about, because it's super important in maintaining and managing risk within your organizations. So that kind of goes along with, how are you managing your patching process? How many have a great patch management process? Okay, I'd love to hear about it. I'm not going to make you talk about it, but if you've got a really cool way that you're managing patches within your organization, that's awesome. We all struggle with this type of thing. Even at the great and illustrious UETN, we suck at being able to effectively keep everything patched the way that it needs to be patched. And we could use all of our time, all day, every day, just managing patches if we had to, or if we could, right? And so, how do you manage your patches? It's one of those things that I wanted to bring up as, this is important, this is like toilet paper, we ought to do it, we ought to use it, okay? And then I figured I'd throw up a comic relief slide at this point. This is a bathroom and a home office, so never mind. Didn't go over well. No laughs, not a single one. Okay, so next we're going to talk about some of the more interesting parts of cybersecurity. Do you have in your organizations enough visibility? What is that? Hopefully that sinks in for a second. I'll pause for dramatic effect. Do you have the visibility to see, or if you were breached, would you even know? How many of you guys are confident to say, hey, you know what? We've got pretty much everything covered. If there was a breach, I'd know about it. Okay? And how many are in the other camp? If we had a breach, there could be ways that we don't know about it, right? Visibility is one of the hardest things to achieve, but it's one of the most important things that we as security professionals need to be focused on, is finding ways to ingest more data, more logs, more information. It's like Big Brother. We want it all. And then we parse through it and we come up with meaningful alerts and notifications and things to figure out whether or not we've been breached, or give us signs or at least some indication if we've been breached. Enter threat hunting. There's not a slide for threat hunting, but how often have you guys heard that term? How many of you guys are threat hunters? Guys or gals, sorry, I do not mean to be exclusive, okay? So threat hunting, there's one or two of you that raised your hands kind of like this. Threat hunting, it's kind of an interesting thing that when we see alerts and see things happen, they're not necessarily always indicators of compromise or a breach. We ingest a ton of data, but what do we have to do with it? We have to analyze it, and we have to kind of follow the water and see where it goes and things. And so threat hunting needs to become part of what we're doing on a more regular basis as security professionals if you're not doing that already. Now, I'm bringing all of this to you from a very elementary or fundamental sort of way, specifically for the folks that I know need some of this more fundamental these fundamental types of information and how to get started in cybersecurity and things. But some of you probably have very mature implementations of log management, a fully functional SIEM where you're ingesting all of your web logs and all of your sys logs, Active Directory logs and everything, and figuring it out. So I'll ask one more question before I move on from there, but how many of you, if somebody logged in with an admin credential on your Active Directory, again, I'm assuming Active Directory here, and it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, how quickly would you know that that happened? Did anybody have a short time frame? You get an immediate email. So you're awake at that time and you're reading your emails. Okay, standard geek stuff. I'm with you there. I understand that. I respond to emails at 2 in the morning sometimes. Instantly, I heard over here as well. How many of you, again, not necessarily to raise your hand, but how many of you wouldn't know if somebody logged in with a domain admin credential or some sort of other administrative credential at 2 o'clock in the morning within your organization, that you don't get a text or an email or anything? These are the most common types of things that are easy to implement, that make it easy for us as security professionals to start understanding what's going on our network. I would say it should be reasonable as a security professional to get a page at 2 o'clock in the morning if somebody uses an admin credential on your network. Unless, of course, you're a 24/7 shop and caveats and other things apply. What I wanted to illustrate with this slide is you just don't want to slide into the crap, as it were. And I don't even know why I put that slide in there. Getting paid to poop. As security professionals, we deal with a lot of crap. We're the people that get blamed when the firewall doesn't let their packets through. It's those darn security guys. It's those darn security guys that make it hard for me to go and buy a product because it hasn't been fully vetted and we don't know how it works within our organization or our enterprise. We deal with it. You need to just be okay with it. Here's Elmo. He's cool. He's getting paid to deal with this stuff. And sometimes it's not a glamorous job. Most people think that being a security professional is all glamour and sexy. That it's the cool thing. Oh man, you get a hack for a living? That's amazing. But what you find out, for those of you that aren't in the security industry yet, you get there and it's 90% crap and 10% cool and interesting and sexy, as it were. And so anyways, that's what that slide's all about. Anyways, I want to talk about order of operations as well. And I don't know why I put this in here, honestly. It's, again, one of those weird slides. But you got a fan and you can blow things one way or the other, but you don't want to necessarily put the fan before, or, so, yeah. The order of operations here is we need to be the fan moving the crap along, doing what we need to be doing, because otherwise what's going to happen is the crap is going to come into the fan, and that's never a good time. Okay, so fun slide, right? Okay, and then there's this one. How many of you feel like this? I'm going to let it go for a second. Maybe you'll understand what's going on here. But this is a legitimate service in Arizona where a guy will come and paint your lawn green. And so when I saw this, I thought, oh man, this has so many parallels with cybersecurity and stuff that sometimes we feel like we're just painting the lawn green. It's brown, it's ugly, it's crappy, it doesn't, it's a pain in the butt to deal with and such, but we feel like we're just painting it over with green paint. Anyways, he does a really good job though. I mean, look at this attention to detail and the corners and all this randomness. Okay, I told you this was going to be a stupid presentation. You were warned. Okay, and then there's the Squirrel Slide. So we're going to talk about something different for a minute. So let's talk about some really cool stuff that we've been working on or looking at recently. So I see Nate over here. I'm going to point him out because he's the one that found this originally. We at UETN have an opportunity from time to time to look at a lot of data. There's a lot of data coming in and out of our network. And when we see some odd things, we have the ability, we don't do it all the time, I want to make sure that's clear, but we have the ability to like dig in and look deeper into some data when it shows up as anomalous and things. And we've been seeing some interesting things. And so this is going to be super hard for most of you anywhere past like the second or third row to look at. But we're starting to see this interesting new trend out there. And what I'll do is I'll explain to you what you're seeing here. If you look at this, this is source and destination traffic that looks just like a full-fledged SMTP chatter. Okay, so this happens on port 25. The host on a specific network creates a connection outbound on port 25, and it just makes it look like, hey, I'm sending email. I'm chattering back and forth on port 25. But it's using, and what you'll see here is on the destination side, all of the proper responses, and it's hard for me to highlight because it's not text that I can highlight, but in that first section where you see, on the destination, second section down, it's showing all of the, hey, glad to meet you, I'm happy to take your SMTP chatter, here's the size of the email I'm going to be sending, here's all this information, and everything else, and it allows the sender over here to start sending data. Now, it looks exactly like standard SMTP chatter that we would expect to see, but what this is this is data exfiltration going on. And it's really super crazy and interesting because it's doing full firewall evasion. Because we've got these really cool firewalls nowadays. Most of you probably have something called the next-gen firewall. We call them that, right? Because they have the ability to not just block a port or a specific protocol or something like that, but it can actually look into the packet and it'll see, hey, if it's on port 25, it should be SMTP traffic. Is it? And if it matches some of those signatures for, hey, is this SMTP traffic? Yes, it is. Okay, let it through. That's what we expect to see. Well, now what we're seeing is deep embeddedness of data exfiltration over something like an SMTP port. But it doesn't end there, because from a similar host, or maybe if this is even the same host, Nate would have to fill us in on that, because he sent me the screenshots, and I appreciate him doing this. But this is the exact same thing going on, where data exfiltration begins to happen over a pretend or simulated FTP session. Now, we're also seeing the same thing with HTTP and secure web and many other protocols around there. And so we're seeing now botnets and other malicious software that's embedding themselves into organizations and networks and starting to look exactly like, and it's not just the headers and things anymore that we're used to seeing, and that the firewalls do scrutiny. I mean, what they generally do is they look and say, hey, okay, I'm seeing FTP chatter in there, but there's a certain point where the firewall just marks it as good and says, go ahead. And what we're seeing now is that the exploitation, the amount of programming and chatter that's going back and forth to enable these types of connections to flow through your firewalls are now occurring on a regular basis. Now, the interesting thing about this is we're seeing this now propagate into VPN services as well. So you've got VPNs and other things that are on your networks that are actually sending this exact type of data, and this is how they're getting past your firewalls and things. There's several VPN companies out there that are involved in this type of firewall evasion things now, and ironically enough, they're some of the primary developers of the technology and libraries that are doing this. It's coming out of the need or the necessity to have firewall evasion for VPN traffic, and the miscreants are now taking it and doing data exfiltration and other things. So VPN services are working that way as well. That's all you get for that piece of slide. This is not my real grandpa, but I'm going to tell you a story that might relate to some of the things I was talking about earlier. Again, follow my ADD. It's not going to be easy. So one of the things, and I've recounted this at StCon before, but it bears repeating. I grew up, first of all, in a very small town. The town is called Gunlock. Anybody know where Gunlock is? A few of you, awesome. Most of you are the southern Utah folks. I grew up in a little tiny town called Gunlock. It probably has 150 people total. It's a farming community, and I grew up in a community where computers weren't really a big thing, and going and changing handline for sprinklers and fields and ranch work was kind of the norm. So I come from solid Utah roots, as you call them around here. But there's one lesson that I learned on the farm that I relate all of the time to cybersecurity. And it's a lesson that I learned, and that I hope it gives you just a little nugget of help and things for you. But there was one time, it comes along with this recommendation, or the story is a story. One time, I was sitting at the edge of a field where we were supposed to change handline. If any of you have done handline sprinklers, this is the one where you carry those sprinklers that are about 40 feet long. They're made of aluminum, so they're light, but you have to go and pick them up off the ground and haul them the 50 feet that you need and put them back together, and the water comes through and it sprinkles the alfalfa or whatever. We're sitting on the edge of a field, and it was me, my brother, and a couple of my cousins hanging out in this field, and it was our job to change handline. But my grandpa was sitting on the edge of the field, and as grandpas do, he has a shovel with him. It wasn't like this in the picture. He was just leaning on it. How many of you have leaned on a shovel before? It's kind of nice, right? Especially when you're in that supervisory position, and I'm sure my grandpa thought that he was being very much the supervisor, and was. But one of the most interesting thing happened during that experience as I was standing there with him, kind of watching my cousins. I was tired of doing handline sprinklers that day and didn't really want to do much. And he said something like, "Hey, don't just stand there, do something." And that was his way of saying, hey, go out and get something done. He says, it doesn't matter what it is, jump up and down, turn around, just do something. And what I took to heart of that, and it took a little while because I was mad at Grandpa because he wouldn't ever let us rest. He was the taskmaster. But what I took from that is that it's a mindset thing. And I'll kind of refer it back to what we heard in our keynotes yesterday. Mindset. Security is not always glamorous. It's not always fun. It's not always interesting. It's sometimes hard. You have to pick up the handline. You have to move it 50 feet. And then you got to do it again 500 times to change the sprinklers on that field. But you got to do something, and you've got to start somewhere. And there's plenty of places where you can start lifting. In fact, it was James Pope. He didn't use his exact quote in his keynote yesterday, but he often just says, lift where you stand. Just do something with what you've got. If you can improve security today and make it even just a little bit better than it was yesterday, regardless of whether you accomplished patch management for your entire organization and can just say okay, we're done, or hey, you've finished vulnerability management for your entire organization and you can dust off your hands and call that done. Some of those things are super hard and crazy to do, but we as security professionals sometimes measure ourselves with grandiose, big projects and things that we have to accomplish, when sometimes all we need to do is move the needle. Keep progressing, keep making good security choices, know that it's hard in some cases to accomplish some of these big things, but move the needle. Continue to make it better and find ways of doing that. You're always going to run into places where you got some executives saying, I'm not going to listen to those security guys anymore. Man, they're costing us money, they're making our work hard. Those kinds of things exist, they're true, it happens out there, but we as security professionals can and should always just move that needle. So, I think that we're pretty close to the end of my slides, but a couple of things that I wanted to leave you with. How many of you know about the Utah Saint Briefings? Okay, about a third of you in here. The rest of you are going to want to take a picture of this slide. You're welcome to. One of the things that we do, whether it's good, bad, if you like how I present, which I suck at, right? But one of the things that I do every other week is I provide a condensed security briefing on all of the recent miscreant trends, tactics, and other things that are going on that you need to know about. And they're the timely things. It's the stuff that's happening right here, right now, that you should probably have some sort of security plan, process, or procedure either in development or implemented at that point. We talk about the latest trends, threats and other things, we do it at the Utah Saint security briefings. It used to be one of those Utah Saint organization only things. Now what we do is we open it up to anybody who wants to go or wants to attend. We do it over WebEx because of coronavirus, and we'll find some other way to do it in the future. But that URL will take you to a website with all of the details on how to attend that briefing. If you're not attending, what I would ask is that you take one opportunity to come and see if it's worth your time and energy to be there. If I don't earn your subscription, not that you can subscribe necessarily, then you don't have to come back. But I'm thinking, oh, dude. I told him he had to at least wear it for an hour today or during the conference. Oh, geez. So that's what this Utah Saint security briefings are. And so please, if you're interested in something like that and that would benefit you, we already have anywhere between about 150 and 200 people on a regular basis that attend those briefings. You're welcome to join, and we'll make it bigger, badder, crazier as we go along. Next thing, the next most asked question I get, so before I get to any AMA or Q&A kind of thing here in a minute, is how do I get involved in SAINTCON? I'll get stopped in the hall 5 times today and be asked this question. So I'm just going to answer it now in case you're interested. One of the things that we do at well, first of all, SAINTCON is an all-volunteer conference and organization. There's nobody that gets paid anything, including myself, to run this conference or to do anything with it. It's all volunteer, and we encourage you to be involved in SAINTCON. The diversity of ideas and everything else brings the community different options and opportunities. One of the things that we do is in January, sometime, I get from the end of October to the beginning of January off, and that's it, because by January, we have to start planning all over again. That's when we do our call for committee, and the committee for the for the SAINTCON conference, these are the folks that are in charge of the major components of the conference. And so if you're interested in getting really deep into SAINTCON, you can join us at the committee level and burn a lot of your time. What's more normal for people is from the time that we do the call for committee, sometime by February or through May, it depends on timing and some other things, we'll often open up call for contests, events, and other things that really evolves into the wrangling of a bunch of staff members. And so we have 3 levels of engagement in SAINTCON. There's that committee level, which you're basically like a department head. And then we've got the staff level, which is these are the folks that are running the IoT village or the packet capture village or in communities and things downstairs. And that they're responsible for that piece or component. And so we start wrangling them together. There's no call for staff. You propose something that you want to do, and then we accept it and you become a staff member. And then sometime generally around the beginning of June, we do a call for volunteers. And this is where we get these types of folks that sit up here joyfully, big smile under that mask, and just hang out and help us do the small little things. And they get to come and attend the conference for free, right? Did you have to pay? Didn't have to pay to be here, gets to come and attend. Those are the ways that you can get involved in the conference, and that's how we run it. So if that's helpful for you and you're interested in becoming part of our conference and our community, watch for those things. Most of these emails and other things get sent out to previous attendees and the Utah Saint lists. They're also in our we publish our calls inside of our Discord server and other things, so we think that it gets enough traction that we don't have to just random email folks. But anyways, one of the questions I get asked. Last slide, and this is literally the last slide, and we'll fill a bunch of time now that I've only done, 35 minutes? We're good. So, it is random Ask Jupiter question time. You can ask me anything that you would like, and I'll do my best to answer it. Anybody? Anyone? Okay, the little dinosaur at the front. Why are you wearing this? So one of the things that we'll do from time to time is we like to troll some of our committee members that have been with us for a long time. Kevin has been on our committee for how many years? A long darn time. And he's one of those folks that we learn, when you become a committee member, you pretty much live at my house for the last month before the conference. We get to share all of the bugs and viruses and things. I think we passed around a head cold pretty good within the committee before the conference. We all tested for COVID like 50 times during that time frame. But yeah, we'll troll, and this is your troll for this year. So there you go. Any other questions? That was a great one. Come ahead. That's a good question. The Jupiter handle. Okay, so I used to, so I'm going to digress a little and then I'll get around to it. How's that? So the interesting thing about a hacker handle is that generally you get to choose your handle until someone else in the hacker community chooses one for you. And so I've gone by many different things throughout the years and such, but there's a point in time when some other senior hacker comes along and says, hey, your handle is now this, and you don't have an option. That happened to me, and so my handle was given to me by a senior hacker named Chris Eagle. Anybody know who Chris Eagle is? Maybe one person right here in the front, one in the back, or whatever. Chris Eagle is one of the most talented reverse engineers in the world. He can take a binary and he can reverse engineer it in better and crazier than anybody. He actually teaches master level classes of reverse engineering at the Naval Academy and other places, and works for 3-letter agencies and other things as a consultant from time to time when they're doing similar types of things. And I had this wonderful opportunity many years ago to run the Capture the Flag competition for the Defcon conference. For those of you that are not familiar with that, that's like the Super Bowl of geeks, warring geeks with computers and things. And so we had this wonderful opportunity, and they had to change all of their handles so that nobody knew who they were in the back of the scene, and we all picked planets within the solar system. So we had Mercury and Venus and all these other hacker handles going around. And I was Jupiter because I was the one that could get 20 other people. There's 20 moons around Jupiter, by the way. 20 other people together to help pretend that we were the ones running this entire Capture the Flag competition when it was really this whole other group behind the scenes. So there you go. That's why I'm Jupiter, and it kind of stuck after that. That's what everybody called me. Good question, though. Anyone else? Now's your chance. I mean, I'll answer anything. Go ahead. So, a good question. Do we ever run short of volunteers in our call for volunteers? This year, we sort of did. It was kind of an interesting year. You guys want more story time? I'll tell you stories all day long if you want. COVID was kind of an interesting phenomenon. As you know, in my opener, we talked about how, hey, it's July, COVID cases are dropping, we're going to do this in person, hell or high water. Bada bing, we announced it. And we go ahead with almost no COVID restrictions in our mindset. We're like, we got this. By the time October rolls around, we're going to be great. And so we do our call for volunteers, and we award a bunch of volunteers, and we give them free passes and everything else. And ultimately, this year in particular, when we announced that, you know what, we've met, we've thought about it, we've deliberated, we've talked about it. And by the way, I don't want to talk about COVID at all ever again, because we have talked it every single way but sideways. But we did that, and we decided we would have to put in some pretty stringent restrictions to keep our community safe. And so we lost a lot of our volunteers. We actually, and I didn't talk about this in the opener, but there was about 10% of the conference attendees that had signed up that requested refunds for the conference. And when you're somebody like me who knows that we do this conference on a very much shoestring budget, and you've got 10% of your conference saying, we don't agree with the fact that you're changing your COVID policies, man, there was some panic. That slide that I showed you with the frazzled hair, that was me literally for 3 months while we kind of went through this process and dealt with things. And I know that it's not comfortable. I'm not going to talk about COVID much, but we appreciate you being willing to be here and be willing to follow some of those guidelines for us. But volunteers, that was the ADD moment. Volunteers we did struggle with this year. We generally don't, but we generally have anywhere between 100 and 150 volunteers every single year doing different things. There's registration volunteers, there's community volunteers, there's AV volunteers, which is the premier team, by the way. You know you've arrived if you're one of the AV guys. They do a great job too, right? Like, listen, it is not easy to get this to work with that monitor down there that I can see and then plug in interchangeably with the thousands of different types of laptops and other things, and they do an exceptional job. And so I can't thank them enough. That applause that you gave them is probably appropriate for now, but give them more applause later, maybe, I don't know. So, yes, but we appreciate more opportunity to have volunteers as part of SAINTCON. Other questions? Come ahead. I do remember the Peacock demo. Yeah, do you want me to tell you a really scary story about that demo, though? Right. Okay, story time again. This will be fast. But then I'll tell you the scary story about Peacock, okay? And my wife is here in the room, and I don't even know if I've told her all of this story that I'll tell in a minute. But yeah, Peacock. Anybody remember the little utility called Peacock? It's like PWAWK is what it used to be called. And it was this really cool utility that spoke on the NetBIOS port 139 and allowed you to just send it at a machine, and what it could do is, based off of some authentication packets that it would send, it could enumerate the password to join a NetBIOS or a drive share. So you could pop up and it would say, hey, there's this drive share available, and this one, and you could click the button and it would just give you the password, literally. It was a terrible vulnerability way back in the Windows 90, I think it was 95, right? 95, 98, somewhere around there. Anyways, one of the terrible, crazy things about that is that we, for a period of time, ethics being somewhat of a gray area at the time, right? We started scanning large portions of the state of Utah for port 139 being open, and then we just send this utility after things. And it did scare the crap out of us because we logged onto machines that port 139 was not being blocked on all over this great state, and found all sorts of things like large lists of entire student bodies with their names, addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, social security numbers, mother's maiden names, and everything else you can think of just sitting out on drive shares back in the day. And that was all there just for the taking and stuff. So Peacock is a great one. Here's the crazy story. I once used that utility to enumerate some machines in our local organization. And one of the machines that I was able to run that against was none other than Steve Hess's personal workstation. Anybody know who Steve Hess is? Okay, some of you do, and you're probably going like, oh crap. Okay, this is basically at the time senior vice president at the University of Utah kind of person. And things. And on that drive, I was able to find once a spreadsheet that had all of the salaries of every single person within our organization. And I made the mistake of downloading that file and showing it to one of my work colleagues. And I almost lost my job. Now, that was the first time, in fact, I think that was the first time that I had really crossed some sort of ethical line, and how do you put it? Where I could see what the outcome likely could have been for something like that. But I had the opportunity to meet with Steve, And it was like my first meeting with Steve. He had no idea who I was. I was just some punk IT guy in one of the buildings on the University of Utah campus. Got to sit down and meet him and talk to him about this particular incident. And I don't even remember what he said. All I heard was, well, we're not going to fire you over this or anything, but don't do this type of stuff again, and kind of stay in your lane and do what you need to do. And it started one of the best relationships with any executive that I've ever had in an organization like that. And so Steve Hess and I are really great friends. We talk probably once or twice a month about different things. I mean, maybe not so much recently. He's been doing other things and is involved in a lot of different things. But and he has as much respect for me as I do for him nowadays, and so there's no harm, no foul historically. But yeah, there was a weekend that I was wondering whether I would have a job when I went back to UETN on the next Monday morning. So, anyways, sorry, honey. I don't know if I ever told her that. I mean, maybe she sort of knew, but I don't know. Let's just say that my stress level over that weekend was not great. Other questions? Great story time, right? Right. This was, as I was mentioning before, hey, we should start with maybe firewalls in front of our networks. This is what the network looked like back then. We could run a port 135 or 139 scan on large swaths of the Utah Education connected network and see thousands of hosts. Like you wanted to search for PC Anywhere back in the day. Anybody remember what PC Anywhere even is, right? The PC Anywhere ports, some of these backup ports and other things, those were just freely available. You'd knock on them and they'd be there. If you had an FTP server with anonymous FTP access, you had illegal files on there because some person uploaded them for you. Like they were using your FTP servers back then in those days for those types of things. But you're right that Peacock was one of those things that got us together, because there's nothing easier to show an executive than, let me just click this button right here and let me show you this roster of students from this university down in the middle part of the state. And when you can show that, it doesn't take very long for them to go, oh crap, yeah, how do we defend against this? You know that firewall thing your IT guys have been bugging you about for a long time? We need that. And so those kinds of things do occur. And I've been around doing cybersecurity for a long time, so I can tell weird, dark stories like that from the olden days. Other questions? We'll go one or two more, and that's it.
So, I'm getting more comfortable being here at StCon, but I hear people talk about like Defcon, Rocket, and it's hard to envision myself there.
Okay, let me editorialize that for a moment. Defcon, Black Hat, B-sides, some of the other, we'll call them more rowdy conferences. First and foremost, the type of, Pope said it great yesterday, and I'll just quote him and just say, Utah has the best, by far, security community and IT community out there. We're connected in so many different ways. There's almost 3 Defcon groups within our state where you can find whole swaths of the country that don't have a single Defcon group out there. I'm getting to your question. We do the crud out of it, and that's why something like SAINTCON is so successful. But one of the other reasons why SAINTCON is successful is we're not a rowdy conference. When you go to a place like Defcon, how many of you have been to Defcon? Okay, so there's probably maybe a quarter or a third of you out there that have gone to Defcon. It's a different environment, and if you come from the sheltered, and I apologize if any of what I say becomes sort of offensive or anything. I'm saying it just kind of for reference. But if you come from the sheltered life and culture that we live, most of us, within the state of Utah, going to a place like Defcon is not your scene, generally. And it's probably something that you should maybe go in with your eyes open or go in and be aware that seeing a guy walking down a hallway with a bottle that's this tall of bourbon and just walking casually is not unnormal at a place like Defcon. I don't know if there's any hotel. Defcon, well, so the question is, are there hotels still there that ban the conference? There were for many years. Defcon has become so big now, and this is going to go partially to answer your question as well. Defcon has become so large that now it's a lot just like most other conventions. It's fairly safe for those of us that are sheltered and have have a different cultural background than what we normally see in the rest of the world. So you can safely go to Defcon and be okay, but it's not going to be unfamiliar for you to be in a presentation where every other word starts with the letter F and things like that. We pride ourselves here at SAINTCON at being a clean conference, a place where you can bring your kids, and I've seen a few of them around today. You can bring your kids and feel comfortable with not having bad words. Now, I can't say that you'll never hear one here, because I can swear with the best of them. But that's the type of difference. And so I hope that maybe starts to answer the thing, or your question, and I'll finish it with this. DEFCON is where I learned about the value of community and what that means. I've got some of my best friends and acquaintances that I've gotten or that I've achieved through that conference. There are smart, capable, impressive people out there that attend that conference. And so you can weed through the bad and absolutely find good, wholesome things at DEFCON. And so I would never discourage somebody from going down there and experiencing that, but just go in with your eyes open and knowing what you're getting into. Go ahead, DCast. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So for those of you that can't hear, he said that he went down in 2019 for his first time and found the Lonely Hackers Club at DEFCON, which is a place where you can just go and find other people that have similar interests and other things, and you probably communicate with them all the time and stuff now, right? You build community. We do community like crazy here in Utah, and we're happy to have you all here as part of our community, but that's a bigger community, better. I mean, there's smart people there. There just really are. You're walking around with people that do the three-letter agency things all of the time and stuff. So last question over here. Go ahead. Did I look at the raw memory dump? Which raw memory dump? At the Hackers Challenge? No, I am not responsible for anything that has been associated with Hackers Challenge. Is there stuff in there that shouldn't be? Okay, be warned. Listen, sometimes, here's the last disclaimer, sometimes we don't have all of the time in the world to check all of the content. Quick story, last night, for those of you that were expecting to see Logan's Run in movie night, we didn't play Logan's Run because we found out that it had a nude scene in it, even though it's rated PG-13. And things. So sometimes it's one of those things that I'm ready to play Logan's Run. I never realized that it had a nude scene in it. It's things like that. So I hope you'll excuse the fact that sometimes you're going to run into things that somebody grabbed and shared from some other con where they don't care about that kind of stuff, or maybe it's real life stuff that you're messing with that could be offensive or cause things. You need to know that that's never our intention here. Within our organization, within this group. But sometimes those things, you can't look at every bit of every piece of thing. So I appreciate you pointing it out, and we'll... Right. So anyways. Okay, well, I'm done with my time for today. Appreciate you being here. I hope it was somewhat informative. We were all over the place, but that's the way it goes. And have a fun time. Enjoy the rest of your con, and we'll see you on Friday, if not sooner.